And I've got a different take and protocol that people are normally told what to use, and that is, don't ask the guy about his disability. So I prefer to say it, and then there's no issue. So I got injured in a mountain climbing accident 21 years ago. I use a wheelchair, have done ever since, and my life goes on. I'm fully independent, so just so you know. Okay. All right, so we are looking at a case study here that we've been involved with recently. Our social side of the organization did some training and out in the Bola, and Bergrivier Municipality asked us if we could help them do a universal access assessment. So it is going, sorry. So the issue was that they needed the universal access study done, and they had to start somewhere. So it's the municipality of 6 towns, and the facilities are duplicated all over. So there's a lot of legwork to do if you do a full universal access assessment. There's 15% of the population in the Bergrivier community of 63,000 people. In other words, 9,400 residents, statistically, as far as we know, have a disability. And the interesting thing is that currently none of their staff have a disability. I don't think that's by desire or anything, it's just happened like that. So they want to change that. So we decided that with them, that we should do a universal assessment for only the premises that are accessed by the public. No point in putting a lift in your office block if the public are never going to go there. So it's kind of using the reasonable accommodation approach quite liberally and saying if you do have someone who applies to work for you and has disability, it's easy enough to then make the accommodation. So there's a significant cost saving in UA and retrofitting if you just do the public areas. So a broader approach was that if you create the environment for shop windows where people come in and it's welcoming to people with disabilities, it would also be an encouragement for a person looking to work there. Otherwise, it can be classified as tokenism. So having this accessible shop window, parking areas was the aim of this project. So I just thought I'd just define disability. It's been covered quite a lot in different ways earlier. So that people like to make the distinction, or I like to make the distinction between impairment, which is an actual physical, psychosocial, intellectual, neurological, or sensory impairment. So I'm in a wheelchair, I was injured, it's a fact, I'm impaired. But I'm disabled by, I think it was one of you guys, I think it was Jeremy O, spoke about attitudinal communication, physical and information barriers. That's actually what disables me. If there are ramps, I have to ask people to lift me up. So that is disabling, not the fact that I'm in a wheelchair. So defining disability, so also it's the definition of disability is extremely wide. And not all people with disabilities require reasonable accommodation. So there are many grey areas. I'm not going to go through a few I can, but come back to that. There is the issue of non-disclosure, and there's also a question of personal choice. Some people are open and will disclose, let's say, a non-visible disability, be it psychosocial or whatever, and then some companies seem to be very keen for you to disclose, because on the one hand it improves your statistics, on the other hand they may want to be offering them support that they probably didn't think was available. And then of course there's the conundrum between, well, not the conundrum, but the inconsistencies between what is required of an employment equity plan and if you want BE rating. So I'm on the BE point of view. not disabled. But then when it comes to defining a disability, the best place to refer is to the technical assistance guidelines on employing people with disabilities, formed out of the Employment Equity Act. And there the three are that the person must have an impairment, it must be long-term or recurring, and it must be substantially limiting. So in my case, obviously all three are like that, but someone breaks their ankle and they're on crutches, not long-term. So that cannot be counted from a statistical point of view as disabled, but that person can still get all the support that is needed in that sort of environment. And then reasonable accommodation, just to emphasize that reasonable accommodation is individual and impairment specific, where the physical environment needs to be accessible, as does information and communication. I mean, technology nowadays around that is extraordinary. You'd be amazed at some of the things that can be done for people with particularly sensory disabilities. It reduces environmental stress factors, that's debatable, and it does provide specific sensory requirements regarding light, noise, and the spatial environment. So we've done the actual physical on-site universal assessment project. We don't call it audit because there is no body in South Africa that sets the standards for what a universal access audit would look like. So we call it a universal access assessment. So we're going to prioritize those areas that want to retrofit, training the municipal staff on UA, universal access and universal design, so that we can transfer skills completely to them so they can do it in the future, and then disability awareness training, HR support, etc. Universal access, that's fairly obvious. I just want to show you one or two things. The national building regulations are those, National Building Regulations, SANS, Part S 10400S, tells you exactly how a building needs to be built so that it is accessible. It's geared towards wheelchairs mainly. It does talk about blind and deaf in parts, but it's mainly around wheelchairs, and it covers surface heights and steps and ramps and all the rest of it. But those are just not followed. That is the big problem. So that's what is not accessible. That is also not accessible if anyone's been in an accessible toilet. And that's an example of where it can benefit many more people than just those with disabilities. And so my personal things are camber. Parking areas that are on the side of a hill is a nightmare. Parking areas, toilets, ramps, it's all there for them to see. It's so simple if they built the buildings like that in the first place. Universal design is a principle they use in creating universal access, and that's the best example I can think of. If anybody's left-handed, they'll know that scissors for right-handed people are not so like for left-hand people. All right. So universal design is an output, and it creates the outcome of universal access. Okay, so let's just read that. I'll read for those who can't. It's a waste of time to be angry about my disability. One must get on with life, and I haven't done badly. People won't have time for you if you're always angry and complaining. That's by Stephen Hawking, the British physicist. And then the power of the web in its universality. Access by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect. So I just wanted to make a final point, and that is that the lesson really around this is that to become universally accessible in an environment that is inaccessible is a hugely expensive and time-consuming job. It really is. The assessments alone are expensive. Then you need to prioritize where you're going to make it accessible, and there's a cost of all that. But it can actually be, if it's brought in at the right time, and the people that are involved in building the building do it right, you've got an accessible environment. If you follow the national building regulations, you will be fine. Maybe one or two little areas. People don't do that. So building control in municipalities, they're weak. Building inspectors pass stuff, and then the architects are looking to cut corners all the time. So that's about 0.5 meter here, okay? The ramp for that, to be the right gradient, is 5 meters. 5 meters. I mean, a ramp then normally would just go back to about here because a ramp's a ramp, which it isn't. So the idea is to get in from the beginning, make it accessible up front. The extra cost in building will be minimal, less than 1%. But if you retrofit, it's hugely expensive.